Okay, let's try another example. You own 240 shares of a computer stock. The company declares a stock split of 5 shares for every 3 owned. How many shares of stock will you own after the stock split? So that means there's 3 stocks are going to become 5. 3 stocks are going to become 5. So you own 240. You want to know, how am I going to know how many I have? Well, let's set up the ratio. The stock split is 5 shares for every 3 owned. So that means 5 shares for every 3 owned shares. 5 for every 3 owned. 5 for every 3 owned. Now, we want to know how to set up this ratio. So what we're going to have to do is set up this ratio the same way. We're going to have shares over owned. Now, according to the information in our problem, what does 240 represent? Does it represent the shares you're going to have or the shares that you already own? Okay. It says we own 240. So that means the 240 must go under the owned 240. Which means this must be our unknown. How many are we going to have left? How many are we going to have after the stock split? We're given the ratio 5 shares for every 3 owned. 5 shares for every 3 owned. We set up our second ratio the same way. So shares over owned means we got to have shares over owned. $240 was what was owned, so that's where the 240 goes, which means our unknown is x. Now we've got to solve this proportion. So we want to cross multiply. So the product of the extremes is 5 times 240. The product of the means is 3 times x. Now 5 times 240 is 1200. To solve this equation, we need to divide both sides by 3. And x turns out to be 3 into 1200 is 400. That says that you will own 400 shares after the split. Okay, 400 shares is what we were looking for. And remember, in setting up a proportion, when you set up the first ratio from the information that they give you, they're always going to give you one relationship. You set up a proportion, and it really doesn't matter whether you set it up this way or if you put 3 owned over 5 shares that you'll get, because then this one will be upside down as well. It is depending on how you set up your first one, the second one will match, or it needs to match, or you're not going to get it right. Guess what? It's time to practice again. Okay, the first problem. A paint manufacturer suggests using 1 gallon of paint for every 400 square feet of wall. At this rate, how many gallons of paint would be required for a room that has 1,400 square feet of wall? And a paint manufacturer suggests using 1 gallon of paint for every 400 square feet of wall. At this rate, how many gallons of paint would be required for a room that has 1,400 square feet of wall? Second example, a runner ran the mile in 6½ minutes. What was her speed in miles per hour? Express your answer as a fraction. Okay, a runner ran the mile in 6½ minutes. What was her speed in miles per hour? Express your answer as a fraction. Now remember, someone that walks very fast is going to go at least 4 miles per hour. So think of your answer when you get it and see if it sounds reasonable. Our third example is a dosage for a medicine is 1/3 ounce for every 40 pounds of body weight. At this rate, how many ounces of medication should be given to a person who weighs 150 pounds? Now this is a good problem because we want to make sure that we get the right amount of medicine. And you would expect someone that weighs 40 pounds shouldn't get as much as someone that weighs 150 pounds. And this is why we need to watch what we're getting and make sure it's a proper dosage. Okay, a dosage for a medicine that's 1/3 ounce for every 40 pounds of body weight. At this rate, how many ounces of medication should be given to a person who weighs 150 pounds? Okay, at this point, you need to stop the tape and work these problems out. When you're through, come back and check your answers. Okay, the answers to these problems are: 1, to paint that room, we're going to need 3.5 gallons. Number 2, the runner is running 9 3/13 miles per hour. And 3, we're going to need 1.25 ounces, or we could also write that as 1 1/4 ounce, whether we gave it as decimal or fractional form. Now, if you had problems with these, go back and check your arithmetic, and if you still can't find out what's wrong or don't understand, ask a math tutor or lab instructor. They'll be more than happy to help you. This concludes our lesson on application problems. At this point, you should be able to set up any problem where you need to find out, given a certain relationship, what are you going to need if the relationship changes. At this point, you should be able to do the 5th activity on Unit 4 Study Guide. If you still have any questions, make sure you ask a math tutor or lab instructor. They're more than willing to help you wherever they can.